Thank you. Oh my goodness. Okay. I didn't expect it to be so loud. Um, I want to thank you all for being here because I know you've had a pretty heavy start. And I want to welcome you to another way of thinking. In the end, this hall is filled with engineers, inventors, innovators, and we need people like you. But very importantly, we need people with disabilities to grow up to be inventors, innovative, creative, problem solvers, right? Where does all that come from? All that comes from all those experiences of childhood. Curiosity, you're born with that, right? If you look at a newborn baby, you see that face that says, what? What's going on? And with whatever is available to them, they are sort of sucked into the world. They are amazed by the world. And they want to explore the world with whatever capacity. They can walk, they can't walk, they don't care. They can talk, they can't talk, they don't care, right? They figure it out, they explore. And whatever it is they understand, whatever makes sense or doesn't make sense to them, there you have it, a child who is constantly figuring. This is how the brain works. It requires you to be confused. It requires you to want to understand. It requires you to believe that you can. And it requires that you have fun. You have to have fun. If you have fun in the process of exploration, it's fine if you fail. It's fine if you didn't understand. You just had fun anyway, right? And if you have enough of these experiences growing up, then you become everything that we want to be tomorrow's innovators. You have perseverance, you have creativity, you think out of the box, everything, all those things that our national education policy is hoping that we'll develop in our students by switching the curriculum around and suggesting all these new ways of teaching and creating all these materials. But who is really looking out for people with disabilities? If you look at a childhood, a typical childhood, across disabilities, it's actually sad. We say play is how children learn. It's the work of childhood. It's how the brain is built. But if you look at how children with disabilities, what are the opportunities available to them? What is their day like? And for how many of those early years where these things are kind of sealed in your perception of who you are, you realize that they are being sent to doctors, therapists, they're basically being constantly fixed. And when they have free time and you leave them, where are the accessible games? Where are the books? Where are the toys? Where are the environments where they get to hang out and learn from other kids? Where are all these things? So for us, this is something that really stayed. This was something that we felt we could change. We had to change. And we began building, searching. Where we couldn't find, we would build. And we create with whatever it is that we had, whatever it is that we found, even stuff that we didn't understand, like this little red box with many holes in it. We have no clue what it is. We have no clue. Somebody gave it to us and said it's a game, but they don't know how it's played. And we said, okay, we'll make a game of that too. As we started interacting with children, we saw joy emerge. Right? We saw kids who started thinking. We saw kids who started experimenting. We saw kids who started having fun. And so this is something that we try to do. We tried to start creating materials, not for kids with visual impairment, not for kids who are deaf, not for kids with cerebral palsy, but for kids, ensuring that a whole range of abilities can still enjoy, can still have fun, can still engage, that everybody can get something from the book. Our goal was not to teach. Our goal was to provide a base where kids could experiment, knowing and trusting that as all children, if you have fun, you have material that forces you to think, you will learn. This is a video, please. I want to stress the role of designing across. Here's a young boy who hates books. And you can see him looking away from books. But you can also see that in a minute, when his hand touches the page, he is sucked in. He is not visually impaired. There's nothing wrong with his eyes. He has huge issues with attention and tolerance. Oh, he's turning the page. Do you know this is the very first book that this boy has ever read without having his arms held and somebody sort of shoving a book in his face and telling him, look at it. And you can see his first response to the book was to look like this, far away, anything except, grinning at his teacher, doing everything that he could to escape this torture for whatever reason. I don't know why he hates books, but he does. This is actually a photocopy of a real book on which we were testing the tactograph, something developed by IIT Madras. In desperation, seeing me lay out books and hand draw and hand create and then dry it for hours, they came up like good engineers with a neat solution which we still use today and we love enormously. All it does is it takes up this image, allows you to say which parts need to be made tactile. It uses Fevicol and a good old syringe, and it works on all kinds of paper. You gotta love it. What makes it fabulous is that our children love touching the page. They love how it feels. And I'm gonna come back to this point about beauty in a minute. I would love to say that, starting from page 1, this boy stayed stuck on the page until page 24, but he didn't. He lasted about 20 pages, which is amazing for the first time you're looking at a book. It's particularly amazing because it isn't even a very interesting book. And in the next slide, go back one. Just play. I think this should be the second video. You can see now he's at the end. He's done. He wants to leave. He's starting to cry. He's calling everybody, save me, save me. His grin is gone. He's crying. And his teacher sort of like, okay, this is not going to work. Let me give up on this. And then suddenly, just as she's ready to close the book, that hand comes out. Oh, that caught my eye. And no, don't turn the page. Let me stay on the page. He is back in control. You can stop, right? He interacts beautifully, long past, just way beyond what anybody would expect. And this underlined for us that this piece of designing for everybody is something we must never lose. Because in designing for everybody, you suddenly find solutions for a group you never thought you were designing for in the first place. Isn't that marvelous? Why stories? Most of the people who hear that we are involved with assistive technologies are also horrified when they hear stories. You're like, oh, those like some toys, games, storybooks. This is India. We want academics, we want geometry, we want science, we want maths, we at least want literacy. What is storybooks? But stories are in and of themselves marvelous because they pull you beyond yourself. They take you to places no one else could get you to. And it relies on your own imagination. An audiobook, a movie, it tells you. You sit there and you're transported. But a story requires you to bring your personality into it so you may go where you want to go. And this is, again, lovely. When we did our very first book, I look back on it with horror, but we keep this as a reminder of what is bad design. Even though we did bad design, I have to say we did many things right. We tried. We tried to create a book that was visible to everybody, could be felt and understood, had braille, had large print, blah, blah, blah. We tried to do all that. We did it really badly. But even this, it's a story about dad who lost a button on his shirt, and on every page you're searching for the shirt, in this, on this, under this, and every button is different. And it differs from the button that Appa lost on some dimension. It's a metal button, it's a wooden button, it's a big button, etc. It's not a very engaging story, but whatever. It's a simple story, and we gave 5 buttons with the book. I learned many lessons in doing this. The very first lesson I got was the first draft of the book. It had come out, and I was called for a meeting at Ability Foundation, and I met George Abraham, who many of you will know. George at that time was a young dad. He had a young, beautiful daughter, 2.5 years old. I gave him the book and I asked for his feedback, and George, being George, really gave it to me. All that worked and the whole heck of a lot that didn't. But then he said, so I get to keep the copy, right? And I said, no, it's my one and only draft. And he said, come on, you got to let me keep it. I'm taking it back home with me. I said, you didn't even like it. Why do you want to take it home? He said, it'll be the first book I can read with my child. I've told her stories, but I have never read a book to her. And I want to be able to read a book with my daughter. And this again reinforced this idea. You design for everybody. When you create a book for a child, you're designing for the parent, right? So you really have to think wide. The other thing, and I'm back to joy here, is that, another child, again, with the same very first book that we did. She was an old student of mine. I knew her when she was a very little kid. She was about 12 years old. And her mom called me very apologetically, saying, ma'am, we hear you've brought out a book, and my daughter is very upset because it's a book for the visually impaired, and you didn't give her a book. So I said, put her on the phone, I want to talk to her. And I spoke to her, and I said, you're 12 years old. This is a book for babies. Why would you want a book like this? If it was a book that I was creating for a 12-year-old, I'd give it to you, of course. But this is for babies, ma. You're way beyond all this. And I told her what the story is. She said, yes, I understand, but I think I still want it. And I said, okay, I want you to come home. I want you to hold it in your hand. I want you to read it and convince me why. It cannot just be I want. I want is not enough for me. Explain to me why it is. Why is it so important that you at 12 want a book that I'd give a 3-year-old? She came and she read the book. And then she says to me, when I was a little girl, my mother had many storybooks from her childhood. And she would tell me all these stories. They were her favorite books. I've never had a storybook that I could read. I've never had a storybook. How tragic is that? And she said, when I become an adult and I'm a parent and I have a little girl, I want her to hold my favorite storybooks. And maybe when I was 3 years old, this would be my favorite storybook. But anyway, since I've never had a storybook, could I have this? How do you refuse, right? That's a pretty powerful request. And sure, she got her storybook, and we got another lesson, another sort of underline. You design books that children love, that children want to hold. They may or may not understand it. They may not get everything out of it. But for heaven's sakes, it has to be beautiful. Beautiful to them in the way they appreciate books, and beautiful for whoever else may be seeing the books. We do have libraries. We have Bookshare, we have Sugamya Pustakalaya, and they are available. They bring accessible books to anyone who qualifies with a print disability. But these books, particularly for very young children, they're boring. They have braille and they have large print. They may have picture descriptions, but they don't really have pictures. And if they have pictures, you just never know what you get. It depends on who's made them. It depends on what they thought was important. Let me assure you, there are few people who think that beauty is important. Often, I see books with lousy tactile. Images like these that you really cannot possibly expect anybody to understand with their fingers. I'm not going to go into this too much because you've heard from Bob already about many of these things. And so we went, keeping these principles in mind, creating beautiful books. And in creating beautiful books, we understood that our children will always teach us how well they can imagine. We received a book made of cloth, breaking every single rule about what is accessible, what is tactile. And you can see, sorry, can you just play that again? You can see here one of twin sisters looking at the book. It's just a cloth page with a black overlay cloth again, with these big rents in it, horizontal rents, cuts. And you see a child picking up one of those little slits and sliding her hand in. And when we asked her, what do you think it is? Since the book is called Possibilities, it can be anything you want. And she said, it's a drawer. It's a chest of drawers. Her twin sister, exploring the same thing, looks in a completely different way, sliding her hands into this and suddenly discovering a little bunch of beads at the top. And she went on and on and on, exploring it, and then said to us, you remember in the other page, there were those pokey things that I said were fireflies? I think those fireflies are living here. This is their home. So this is a gate, and these are the fireflies, or maybe they're bees, and this is a beehive, and on and on and on. Not everyone is able to do that. Many people, many of the children seeing this book are like, but there's no braille, but there's no story. Where do I begin? What do I do? And part of our responsibility is to find that balance. Create a structure, provide a challenge. And we do this endlessly. We do this not just with books, we do this with games. You see before you on the screen a whole bunch of little cotton-filled shapes stitched in cloth with different textures. Some of them are recognizable shapes, maybe a square, maybe a moon. Some of them are just random shapes. They have all kinds of textures and interesting to feel and made of metal. And we've given it with, made of cloth, with a little magnet behind it. We've also given a base cloth with shapes so that children who need a way to begin have a way to begin. But really, you leave kids with these things and they find the most curious and wonderful ways to play. We had imagined it, this was during the pandemic, as a way, giving children a way to create. Kids with cerebral palsy, kids with visual impairment, and just kids, could create and tell their own stories, build their own picture. And you saw very quickly how they did things we never imagined. They built one on top of the other, they built vertically, they built horizontally, they built behind metal trays so that the metal trays had a frame. Amazing stuff. We run this experiment regularly with our members, giving them a paper on which we add a lot of textures, and we ask them to explore and tell us a story based on these random textures. And what starts as something that they can't do pretty soon gets converted into something that they can. In order to provide children with the structure that we want, with every book and material we create, we also create suggestions. We make sure that we insert skills that children need, and we work across these three big areas: giving children things to discuss and discover, explore and learn concepts, and develop in creativity and imagination. What you see in this very fuzzy image, I'm sorry it's so fuzzy, is a picture of the sun. We asked two blind children to draw the sun for us. And here is one, which is a circle on the top with an eye, with, you know, those radial lines, the typical way in which a sun is drawn, and a happy face in the middle. Clearly someone who has been well instructed in what the sun is like. In the second image, you have a child who did not receive instruction but did develop imagination. And here you have a mess of lines, and a series of concentric, not concentric, but like circles kind of moving out. And you ask the child, what have you drawn? And explain it to me. And she says, it's the sun and this is the heat. Don't you love how just left to themselves, smiley faces disappear and the sun really takes shape. In everything that we do, we try to stretch into, you know, all the things that they will have to know. Developing tactile memory, symbolicism, right? And again, develop with kids with visual impairment in mind. We find kids with intellectual impairment starting to understand. Regular kids who've never been exposed to this idea of symbols and maps start to get it because they've done it in a storybook. Things that we've been told you must never do. Present half an animal to a child. Present random squares that represent animals or things. We do, and we do it in a story. This is a video, please. And it's a story about an elephant whose friends helped the elephant dress up. And they get to actually build the elephant and tell us the whole story. And they are able to do that. In every book we create, we ask children, which is your favorite page and why? And from this we learn both that children have an amazing oneness of what they love, and also children constantly teach us what is pleasurable. And if you do this, you can do these leaps. A book that you would never adapt for the blind. An elephant is an elephant of fish is a concept that they are actually able to grasp and explain back to us. When you create books for everybody, you get this level of engagement. This should have volume. This is a group of kids closing their eyes and trying to figure out what is on the page. He says it's very difficult.
Is it a star?
Is it a star?
Almost. It looks like a star.
It looks like a star, but it's not.
It is about nature. What is
It's all about nature.
You always see around.
You always see it around you.
In Shakti school, flower. Notes the middle. The flower. No, there's apple. Almost. There's apple. 3. Yeah.
Wow! Isn't that a good book? Isn't that a good book? Do you care who is sitting in that group? Are they not having fun? How much? I can tell you n number of lessons from that one gathering. So I just want to end here saying, please do not undervalue the importance of play, the importance of creating universally enjoyable games that fill kids with this massive interest in using their entire brain to learn, to imagine, and to create. You see all our various ways in which you can get in touch with us to learn more about us. I encourage you to please go ahead and explore. Thank you.